the Arhat, or the saint, develops a strange and wonderful alchemical power. And it is reported throughout the history of Buddhism how these gentle persons, going into the most dangerous places, not only survived, but transformed these places, bringing education and enlightenment, and gradually winning the respect and admiration of those who did not really understand, but could feel something in themselves. It touched their love, which had been sleeping so long. Then also, Buddha points out that love arises from a kind of right-mindedness, that it arises from the kind of thinking which is forever seeking generous thoughts, which gradually loses the instinct to seek for darkness. We have a tendency strong within our natures to be critical. We have an instinct to recognize more of the vices than we do of the virtues. We also have some negative persuasion in us that causes us to expect evil. And Buddha warns that all these negative habits moving in upon us can destroy right-mindedness, can cause us to gradually be incapable of fairness, that we have been insulted 1,000 times does not permit us to be unfair the next time. That we have been neglected does not make it right for us to neglect, nor does the number of neglect cause us the rightness to declare the world to be neglectful. All things are incidents and separate things. And because what happens to us is suspended so closely from our own conduct, and we come so near to those rewards which are justly and properly our own, right-mindedness, according to Buddha, causes us to seek in ourselves for the roots of our unhappiness, and to change those roots in ourselves, and to refrain forever from this tendency to blame others, even though another person may in thoughtlessness, ignorance, or selfishness do a thing injurious. This does not mean that we must be injured. It means, however, that if our own level is the same as theirs, if we accept as they gave, they believed they could hurt, so they performed a bad action. We believe we can be hurt, therefore we accept this bad action and suffer. Both persons are necessary to this pattern of suffering, and no individual can completely injure us or totally discomfort us unless we have a large measure of his thinking in ourselves. We are like him, or he could not move us. And as we do not appreciate or respect those parts of him which lead to hurt, we have no reason or right to admire or respect those parts of ourselves which accept hurt through lack of understanding. Thus, the injury is a proof of our own insufficiency. And if our sufficiency is great enough, we can pass through every disaster, as Buddha advised his monks, and with it all, regardless of what happens, live and die, loving life, loving the world, and sensing a wonderful goodness everywhere. And this, more than anything else available to man, calls forth goodness, calls forth in others that which is discovered in ourselves. With right-mindedness also, Buddha very clearly points out what he calls generous sympathy. A generous sympathy might seem to be a strange thing to say about a person who believes that all things arise in ourselves. And among Buddhists of some persuasions, this generous sympathy has been neglected, yet it is distinctly a part of Buddha's doctrine of love. Sympathy does not mean that we agree with those who bring us unhappy reports. But generous sympathy is this mysterious power to realize that they can suffer, and that this suffering is unavoidable to them because of the level of consciousness on which they exist. That in these needs, the individual is not merely shamming his misery. He is not to be condemned because he is unhappy. He is not to be told simply, forget yourself and be happy. Nor is he to be told, you earned it, therefore it's yours. Or if it's karma, work it out. Those are not the attitudes which Buddha advised, even though they might appear to be the simple statement of his principles. Buddha pointed out constantly that the individual must bear out of his own experience the realization that when a person in a certain level of consciousness is in trouble, that person is suffering, and that there is no immediate and instantaneous release for him, that he cannot merely be advised or reprimanded, that he cannot simply be left totally to his own resources without hope, that there has to be in this thing that is called compassion something that reaches out and in a constructive and adequate manner not only solves this mystery for ourselves, but contributes everything that can be contributed to the rescuing of the other person from suffering. Buddha points out also, of course, that even among his disciples there was suffering, for they were not perfect. They were not able to completely overcome all of these limitations and restrictions of consciousness with which man is burdened. Therefore, Buddha went further than this. He pointed out that man has a greatness that is greater than some animals, that man, therefore, is in the presence, in nature around him, of infinite growth, in infinite degrees of growth. Therefore, he does not condemn the flower because it is not a man, nor the beast because it is not a god. It is his right and his privilege to serve and preserve the growing life in the flower and in the beast. Nor is it his right to judge either, but to recognize both to be the unfolding love of God growing up in space. Therefore, this generous sympathy causes the gardener to take away the weed that endangers the plant. It causes him to strive in one way or another that he shall not sit in an ivory tower and judge anything, but that an infinite compassion shall flow out from him to that which needs, always and forever. And this can happen because this compassion is in no way conceived as related to reward of any kind. We have the same concept again in the Christian doctrine, where we are told that the duty of the farmer is to plant the seed, but the growing is according to the will of God. It is not that man shall stand by and decree the harvest that he has earned. Rather, it is that he shall give of his compassion and leave the works of that compassion to their own fulfillment in the growth of things. Thus, compassion is not limited, nor can the compassionate person be disillusioned. We can only be disillusioned when we place some restraint, some boundary upon our own action. When we say this should produce this, then we may be disappointed. But when we only give of what we are, giving without reservation and without hope of reward, we can never be disillusioned. Yet if we give of hope with hope of reward, we are not true to the Buddhist principle of love. Because love is not hoping reward, but is giving out of the inevitability of its own existence, out of its own totality. Man does not possess love. Man does not own this emotion. It does not rise in him to be turned on and off at his pleasure. This infinite emotion abides in space and is the common property of all things that love. Therefore, man is its steward and its servant. It is his right to give it, but it is not right for him to dictate as to its action or its consequences or the motions which it shall follow in the achievement of its works. So, true understanding of this kind brings Buddha finally to the consummation of his concept of what is love. And he analyzes it and he tries to find a word. And in translating, we try to find the word that carries his meaning as nearly as we can. He searches our terms for love and finds that they are not useful very much because of the overtones we have associated with them. The very moment that we think of love, we think of desire. We think of the rise of passions within ourselves. We think of our affections, and perhaps we become immediately melancholy at the thought that we are loveless or that our love has been betrayed. Therefore, everything that we have as a connotation of love has become semantically outraged. And when we even try to think of the love of God, we are only able to think of this love in some relation to human emotion. And there are many persons who have left religion merely because some religious person has been unkind to them. They have been unable to escape the infinite personalization of the terms that they use. Buddha also, of course, shows us how before the word love can be placed many other words, such as personal love, impersonal love, selfish love, unselfish love. These terms are perfectly proper to our thinking, and we use them every day, although the thinking itself is unreal. We do not think the term selfish love is particularly unreasonable. Yet, in a strange way, the mixture of these terms has resulted in the dilution of our conduct. We have accepted the compromise of conduct with the words until they are strangely and terribly mixed together. So Buddha is searching for a new word, something that carries with it the kind of love that he needs. And he finally hit upon a term which we translate kindness. Now, kindness is a very simple word. To most Western persons, it is not ardent enough. It doesn't carry with it the tempests of affection, which we signify as necessary. There are many people who do not believe their relatives love them, unless these relatives selfishly try to possess them. And the individual who does not experience possession is not sure that they are the recipient of affection. Buddha says this is due to habit, to false mental training, and to the deluding of our senses by traditional acceptances. Kindness, however, is to us somewhat too impersonal. We can be kind to animals. We do not expect anything from these animals. We simply pat them on the head, and if they give us one great eyeful look, we are completely consoled. It's all we expect. or if they remain with a certain note of faithfulness through the years, we begin to consider them excellent substitutes for humanity. Actually, however, perhaps when we see the little dog or the little animal and reach out our hand and pat it, it is perhaps, as Buddha would point out, the most perfect experience or example of love that we have ever exercised. First of all, it is so simple that we have overlooked it. We have certainly overlooked this power to reach out our hand and touch gently the person in trouble. We have overlooked the possibility of this kindness reaching into situations which we have deluged with remedies and which stay unmended. It is this simple, unulterior motion, this simple expression of ourselves to something from which we expect nothing, in which we express true tenderness, a truly great emotion, which because it is so slight in our experience, we have disregarded. So we say that kindliness has some mysterious power, and Buddha points out that unkindness is one of the great detrimental powers, that a tremendous amount of ill karma rises from unkindness, that this unkindness is rooted in unthoughtfulness or indifference or in pressures of one kind or another. Therefore, we have to use certain exercise of will or have to immerse ourselves in a stupid situation, or we have to be indoctrinated with false ideas before we are unkind. And as we are rescued from these ulterior and false values, the result is an increase in kindliness in our own natures. Can we love anything so much that we can be truly unkind? So we begin to rationalize this. What is kindness? Kindness may, to our mind, be the desire to tell our adversary what we think of him for his own good. Here again, however, a little analysis will frequently indicate we're not doing it for his own good. We would like to think that we are. But what we are doing it for is because it gives us a great deal of satisfaction to do it. Yet when this same person does something to us for our own good, we bitterly resent it and declare this person to be cruel and unkind. Now, kindness, of course, like the kindness of parent for child, cannot be a complete emotion without certain reservations. There must be a strong kind of kindness. And Buddha liked to believe that his doctrine, his disciplines, constituted the forces or factors to create a strong kind of kindness. A kindness which becomes a common denominator glorifying other relationships. Buddha also thought of the term friendship, but he considered that this also had fallen into ill repute, not because friendship was wrong, but because the word friendship no longer conveys the true meaning which he is seeking to grasp. And we know from our own experience that friendship is exploited, and exploited desperately by all involved in the factor. Therefore, friendship, to his mind, is more easily exploited than kindness. Kindness leaves the exploiting one in a tremendous situation of self-conviction. It is very difficult to do an ill act to a person who is truly kind. It is also very difficult to think of selfish kindliness. Or is it very easy to imagine a negative pull for kindness? We have the term unkindly. But where we can only use this unform, we are using only a reversal of the word itself. When we oppose kindness to something, it must be to cruelty or something of that nature. For kindness to Buddha represented a subtle stratum beneath things. Kindness makes the home better, even though there be frequent talk of love. Love without kindness is barren. Kindness without love is unthinkable, because in some way kindness has to carry the basic impulse of love. And the basic impulse of all love is to give of self. Therefore, kindness is a motion or action from self as directly as possible, the motive being service, the motive being encouragement, or some emotional action which has a nobler and more positive connotation. So while we can rationalize and argue kindness out of existence, Buddha points out that this rationalization of kindness is not important. It has no real bearing upon anything, because kindness is a natural instinct and impulse in those in whom life has begun to mature. And while in many instances this kindness is obscured, locked, and only capable of partial expression, still in certain situations the human being is moved to be kind, not because his religion tells him to, not because it's going to make him more acceptable to his neighbor, but simply because he feels that way. And this feeling of basic kindness and kindliness, Buddha feels should be cultivated and could be made stronger in the life of every individual who comes in contact with other persons. Buddha also points out that this kindliness carries within it the basis of possible human relationships that can lift our world out of tragedy. Kindliness, if generously and generally practiced, would undoubtedly result in man seeking understanding, whereas now he seeks misunderstanding. Now, a man seeks negative things for two reasons. First, because he wishes to exploit them, or second, because he believes them to be true. Thus he is taking advantage of a negative condition, or else he is accepting that which he has expected to find. The expectation is in himself. And because of this expectation, he is ever able to discover what he expects. As man changes inwardly, therefore, and his expectations change, he discovers that the world around him appears differently. And to the kind, the world is kindly. And if individuals are not kindly, this does not change the basic conviction, because this kindness is not rising from the act of another, but from the instinct of self, from within the inner part of our own experience. So Buddha gives us sympathy, kindliness, compassion as being the great terms under which love becomes the minister of human good, and that the purpose of love is to give expression and integration to these things. Persons are brought together in every conceivable relationship of life for only one essential purpose, and that is to discover truth. Regardless of the situation, there is a truth in it somewhere, and that truth has to be good. And the discovery of that truth is the solution of that situation, whatever it may be. Man seeking truth with a full heart loves that which brings him truth, whether it is immediately enjoyable or not. And having become convinced that the world is the instrument for the attainment of truth, that this machinery that has been set up has as its ultimate purpose the release of man from suffering, man can then love the world with a great love. But by discipline and by growth and by understanding and penetration, he learns the lessons at the same time. He must not think that he can love only that which teaches him nothing. In other words, only that which caters to him. This is a very negative attitude, and one which can never release the soul from suffering. Man must love most that by which the law is revealed, by which value is set up and established in his own consciousness. If, therefore, love is more important 16 times than the disciplining of the mind itself, Buddha is telling us that actually Buddhism is an escape from the tyranny of mind, and that just as man must rescue his consciousness from the tyranny of his mind, he must also rescue love from the tyranny of his attitudes. It is this rescuing that restores the sublimity of love, even as the rescuing of the mind restores the sublimity of consciousness. Therefore, consciousness and love are intimately associated. They are perhaps in their essence and substance identical. Whether they be identical or not, we do not know, but the disciplines by means of which we attain both are the same. And it is easier, as Buddha points out, to defeat the mind, to rescue the mind in its intellectual procedures, than it is to rescue the heart. Therefore, the rescuing of the heart is the 16 times greater than the rescuing of the mind.